Kahani Bar brings you a cocktail of stories in English and in Hindustani. I am Richa, and today's story is from Fauji Heart, a collection of human stories with the backdrop of Indian Army. Written for you by Neerja K, these stories will sometimes bring a smile and sometimes a tear, but they will always allow you to peek into the lives of the human beings who are often hidden behind that stiff uniform.
Our story for the day is Sara. The night was dark, pitch dark. If you held your own hand an inch away from your nose, you couldn't even see its outline. The snow was knee-deep and more continued to fall silently. The sky was moonless. Only layer upon layer of dark, menacing clouds hung like demons, and even the vast sheets of snow managed to glow only imperceptibly. Sara was crouched behind a large fir tree. Her body was curled up in the fetal position, and her heart was pounding so fiercely that she thought it would leap out of her delicate body any minute now. She was unable to control her panting. It seemed so loud to her that she was scared that someone would hear the sound and she would be discovered. That was the last thing she wanted, to be found out at the final stage of the game. No one should find her, and she would be the winner. She had been running through the snow-clad meadows and scaling the slopes up and down for the last 24 hours. This was her second night out in this brutal wilderness. She should have reached the finishing line in the wee hours of the first day, but she had lost her way. So, she had been compelled to spend most of that day hiding from any human form as per the rules of the game. Now, here she was spending another freezing and scary night in the open, away from her home. Through the night, she kept thinking to herself, what kind of game was this? There was no fun in this game. On the contrary, it was a scary game, a dreadfully scary game. But what choice did she have? Sara was very cold, exhausted, and now very hungry. The sattu she had been given at the beginning of the game, before leaving home, wasn't meant to last this long and was now finished. Thirst did not pose a problem, as she had eaten a handful of snow to quench her thirst. I must keep going, she thought to herself. She could not afford to sit in one place for too long. The blood in her veins would surely freeze, and the vultures would feast on her flesh at daybreak. What should she do? She wondered. Suddenly, in the distance, she heard crunching sounds in the snow. The sound was quite different from the soft shuffling noise her tender and light feet made. She was sure that this was the unmistakable sound of heavy boots on snow. But what she wasn't sure about was if the feet in those boots belonged to a soldier or one of the others. Scared, she craved for the reassuring warmth of her mother's touch. She missed the aroma of her mother's kitchen and the coarse touch of her father's thick firun that she felt when he lifted her into his arms each time he returned from the dargah. She yearned for the safety of her little hut, where Sheru always stood guard, barking at the slightest movement. She was not sure what had become of her dog, for he had not warned them that night. Did they poison him, or did they shoot him? Sara wondered, and her heart ached at the thought. Tears began to sting her eyes again. She quickly wiped them away with the back of her numb hands. There was no time for tears, as she had to reach her destination and finish the game. Then she could return home so that her parents could be released from the clutches of those others. She might even be able to find Sheru. Sara knew she was very close to her destination, but now there was someone following her. Who was it? A friend or a foe? Her 8-year-old mind did not understand whom to trust anymore. Everyone seemed to be an enemy these days. Was it not Rahim Chacha who had brought those men home last night? They looked like soldiers, and yet they were not. They appeared like friends, and yet they were not. They were wearing some kind of a uniform, and their boots were just like the boots that the Faujis wore as they continually patrolled the countryside. Day or night, summer or winter, all her life she had seen the Faujis tirelessly threading their steps through forests, up and down the slopes, through the wild flowers and through the thick snow. Did they never rest? They looked scary with those guns slung across their shoulders. Her father had assured her that they were friends. They kept the others away. But she would always hide behind the trees whenever she spotted them. The 4 men who Rahim Chacha had brought home had looked as scary as the Faujis. One of them had been very nice to her in the beginning. He had given her some biscuits and even a packet of chocolate. Goodies she rarely got. Then he had lured her into the inner room of their small hut. There he had ordered her to remove her firun. She had refused. This had infuriated the man, and he had shouted at her. Shocked and scared, the half-eaten chocolate had fallen from her hand and she had shrieked, "Baba! Baba!" But there had been no response to her cry. The man who had brought her in stood in front of her, towering like a pine tree. In the dim light, his huge form had nearly filled the doorway, and she knew she had no place to run. She had been suddenly startled by loud voices from the next room. She had recognized her father's voice. He was pleading with Rahim Chacha. "Hayo, Rahima, my friend, what kind of shaitan has taken possession of your mind? Why have you brought these devils to my home? They are not one of us. I have nothing to offer. Why did you bring them here?" Sara heard a menacing laugh. "That shaitan is called money, my dear. Your friend has been paid a huge sum of money to find us what we wanted. Your little Shehzadi. And listen, don't make any fuss or you will not live to see daylight." Sara had stood still in shock as she heard her mother wailing and pleading for mercy. Her mother's wretched pleas had soon been drowned out by the same thunderous voice. "Oh, shut up, woman, or else you know what we can do with you and your daughter right here with your husband watching us. So shut up and be grateful." Then turning to his companions, he had ordered, "Don't waste time. Make them shut up and then tie them up. I want no mess until our job is done." He had seemed to be the one in charge. Sara hadn't really understood what was going on, but even her tiny brain had known that something was wrong, terribly wrong. She had turned pale with fright and had wet her salwar. A small puddle had formed at her feet on the mud puska floor. She had felt embarrassed and ashamed of herself, but she had been too frightened to move. She had just stood there, rooted, her feet wet. The man in front of her had been mad with anger when he had noticed the puddle. He had yelled for help. "Number 607, get a fresh set of clothes for the girl. Hurry!" "Why? Do you want to deck her up like a bride?" "No need." "No, you idiot. She has soiled her salwar. Will you move fast?" Sara had felt weak in her legs. Her voice had got lost in her lungs. She had then swooned and passed out. When she woke up, her clothes were dry and fresh. Also, There were nice warm socks and fur-lined gumboots on her feet, but she was feeling a bit uncomfortable around her waist underneath her firran. She had been shifted back to the outer room and was lying on the floor. She had been horrified to see her parents helplessly tied to the wooden pillar that stood in the center of the room, supporting the roof of their cottage. Rahim Chacha was nowhere to be seen. The sight of her father bound so helplessly had made her want to throw up. Her father was known for his strong body and a good heart, and her mother for her beauty and poise. But now it seemed that her father had grown weak all of a sudden, and her mother looked like a wilted daisy as her head had hung low on her delicate neck. Her ashen face had seemed to be drained of all colour. As she had looked around, she had seen the pot of haq, the local greens, and a small portion of mutton still simmering on the small hearth in one corner of the room that served as the kitchen. Their dinner, which she had been looking forward to just a while back. But now she had lost all her appetite. Although the embers were still glowing, there were no flames dancing in the hearth. The 2 sheep and their recently born lambs were huddled in one corner, trying to keep themselves warm, oblivious of the drama unfolding around them. Nearby, a few hens and chicks were safely resting under a huge round wicker basket that served as their pen when turned upside down. Sara's parents had stared at her with glazed eyes. Their shadows on the floor behind them had seemed eerie as they danced every time the lantern had moved in the big man's hand. She had realized that her safe and warm home had suddenly turned frightfully scary and icy, like a graveyard. Suddenly the lantern had come very close to her face, and she had seen the ugliest face ever, leering at her. "Good girl, I see that you're awake. Now the game begins. You want to play a game, don't you? We will play a game of hide and seek." Sara had not wanted to play any game with these people. She had tried to move towards her Ammi and Baba. The strong, rough hands of the intruder had grabbed her back. She had been shocked to see one of them had his gun aimed at her parents. "Do as you're told, or else you will see your Ammi and Baba lying dead where their shadows are dancing." Her mother had pleaded again. "In the name of Allah, please let my little girl go. I will do whatever you want. Just let my little princess be. She has been gifted to us by Allah after much mannat." The leader had snarled at her. "And now he has chosen her for the sacred mission, you stupid woman. Don't you understand that you cannot sneak into the camp without raising suspicion?" He had come closer to Sara, and she had shuddered nervously. She could smell his obnoxious breath on her face, and his dirty yellow teeth had gleamed in the faint light of the lantern. He had run his coarse finger on her pale cheek and had said, "This little doll of yours is perfect for this game. Isn't that so, my little moon?" Sara had wanted to bite his coarse finger that was meandering crudely along her shivering lips. She had tried to rein in her thoughts as she realized that if she bit his finger, the gun would go off and she would be dead along with Ammi and Baba. "No, I must not do anything foolish," she had thought to herself. "It might be better to play whatever game they want me to play. At least then they will not hurt us." The dirty villain had brought his lips almost to her ear and whispered, "So is our little Shehzadi ready for the game?" Feeling too scared to speak, she had nodded yes. "Good then. This game is called Jihad, and we play this game for Allah. Do you understand? This is for Allah. If you don't play this game as per the rules, Allah will grant you a place in hell. He has specially chosen you for this game. Do you understand? He whispered again. Sara had not understood any of it, yet she had nodded yes. Good girl. Here are the rules. You run into the forest across the meadows, down the hill and up again, and reach the Fauji camp. You know where it is, right? I have seen you playing around there. I will come looking for you. Do not get caught by anyone. If I catch you, I will shoot you, and my friends here will shoot your parents. Is that clear? He thundered. And if anyone else catches you before you reach the camp, do not speak. If you do, you will never see your Ammi and Baba again, and you will become an orphan. Once you are at the camp, you must scream loudly for help and start crying. No matter what, do not stop crying. They will take you inside. Once you're inside, reach under your firan and press this red button over here. And then the game will be over and you will win. Then you and your parents will be free and will get a big special prize. Sara's parents had looked at each other with horror and had cried once again for mercy. Her mother had wept, pleaded and cursed all at the same time. Ya Khudaya, Rahm, have mercy on my child. What kind of animals are you? Even a beast would spare an innocent child. You are worse than a monster. Just let her be. She's already shivering like a dry leaf. Can't you see, you rogue? Hi Allah, save my child. Sara had realized her mother's pleading was falling on deaf ears. Very courageously, she had said, Ammi, don't cry. Baba, take care of Ammi. I will do as they say and will be back before you know it. After all, it is only a game, as they say. She wiped the fresh tears from her cheeks, where her earlier tears had left dry saline streaks. She turned to her tormentors and said, Well then, I'm ready. Let Ammi and Baba go. Please release them. I promise I will do as you say. The leader had patted her shoulder. You are a great child. Your parents should be proud of you. You will be the youngest Fidai ever. Turning to her parents, he said, Her name will go down in golden letters in the history of this great jihad. You fools, she's about to earn a berth in heaven for herself and for both of you. So celebrate. Send her off as you would on her wedding day, like a bride. Sara's mother wailed. Khudayo, what kind of cruel people are these? What are they doing in your park name? All this time, her father had been weeping quietly. He was overwhelmed with anger and distraught with shame at his helplessness. She had been allowed one last embrace with her parents and then had been roughly hauled away out of the cottage. Now run and don't let me fight you. Go on, girl, run. She had not seen or heard Sheru. Where was he? What had they done to him? She had been hopeful that he might follow her quietly after a while. Seeing the dense darkness outside the cottage, all her courage had evaporated. Flurries of snow had hit her tiny form. Scared and shivering, she had taken her first steps tentatively, step by step, into the unknown, wading and wavering in the deep snow. She had longed for Sheru's familiar footsteps, but there had been none. How she wished that Sheru too had been a part of this game, walking by her side. She had turned to look back several times, wishing for Sheru to appear, but no such thing had happened. Deep in her heart, she'd known that. So she had kept on marching forward, each step taking her away from her home. She had been able to hear the wailing of her parents from their isolated cottage for quite a distance. Then it had faded, and soon it was gone altogether. For the first time, she had realized how dark, cold, and lonely it was. But she had continued walking, wading through the snow. She hadn't stopped. She had decided to win this game at any cost. She didn't want to stop and think about whether she would see her parents again. She couldn't afford to do that. She had to focus on the game. She had been so brave despite the biting cold and the pain and fatigue in her legs. Every now and then, a painful visual from the previous night would pop in her mind, and she would will it away by shaking her head. She had done so well under the horrible circumstances, and now here she was, about to be found when she was so close to her destination. No one had come looking for her till now, she was sure. But now, there was definitely someone nearby, crushing the snow beneath their heavy boots. Why now? Allah, send me back to Ammi and Baba. She prayed with an aching heart. It had been snowing continuously. Her cheeks were burning with the biting chill. Her tender, parched lips trembled. Her heart thumped so hard that she thought it might rupture her delicate ribcage and fall out, and she felt a deep throbbing in her temples. She wanted to close her eyes and sleep, but suddenly a strange calm fell upon her and her eyelids started to droop. She had barely closed her eyes for a few seconds when she heard a flurry of footsteps, not of one person, but more. She shook herself awake. She could not sleep. She had to save Ammi and Baba no matter what. Her mind was made up. She would run out from behind the tree and reach the camp before anyone could see her. This was her only chance to reach the camp and complete the game. The poor child had no inkling of what would happen once she reached the finishing line of this wretched game. Sara went for it. She drew on every ounce of strength that she was left with and ran out from a hiding spot. She could hear footsteps coming after her, but she ran as fast as she could in the snow, hobbling on her half-frozen feet. Suddenly she halted as she heard her name called out. She wasn't sure if she was awake or asleep, dreaming or hallucinating. How was it possible otherwise? She pinched her cheek. Despite being numb from the cold, it hurt to do that. She was awake, and yes, it was her Baba's voice that she had heard. She recognized it so well. There was no mistake. She waited and heard it again. Sara, my princess, wait! It is I, your Baba. Then she heard Ammi. Wait, my doll. Wait, Beti Jaan. It was definitely her Ammi's voice. But why did it seem like it was coming from inside a deep well? Sara turned ever so slowly, as if she did not want to break the spell. It was just before dawn, but visibility was almost zero, and it was still snowing. When she turned, she saw faint silhouettes of so many people rushing towards her. Closest to her, she thought, was a Fauji. Or was it one of the others? He must have been the one she had heard first. But there was no Baba or Ammi. She froze. Her mind began racing. Should she play the last part of the game? Should she press the red button now? Or when more Faujis came? What had that monster told her? How would she find the red button in this dark morning light? A strange haze crept into her mind and started engulfing her senses. If she stopped, they would kill Ammi and Baba. They had found her. She had lost the game. Sara did not move as the shadows closed in on her. Her brain was numb. She removed her headscarf slowly, as if in a trance, and with great difficulty wriggled out of her firrin. She had never felt so cold and vulnerable. She rubbed her eyes vigorously so she could see better. She stared down at her tiny midriff, trying to locate the red button. It was at this precise moment that Captain Vinod Rawat turned on his flashlight. His heart skipped a beat. Along with the dancing snowflakes, illuminated by the beam of his flashlight, stood a little girl, no more than 8 years old. She stopped fiddling with the buttons of the crude bomb tied to her waist and looked straight at the beam of light with big, dazed eyes. "Stop! Don't touch! Put your hands on your head. Do as I tell you. If you don't obey, I will surely shoot you." Sara froze again. As she stared at the bright light pointed at her, she was blinded momentarily. She could not see anything, and now she had no choice but to obey. Sara was again unsure whether it was a dream or reality. Nonetheless, she slowly raised her hands and put them on her head. Her eyelids were too heavy to remain open. She was tired. She could still hear her parents speaking to her gently and softly. Her hands were no longer obeying her and kept sliding down from her head again and again. She was slipping in and out of consciousness. She wished that all this was a bad dream and she would wake up and find herself nestled in her cottage in the warmth of her mother's arms. Captain Rawat closed in on her carefully. His nerves were tense. He could not afford to spook her. Had there been enough light, one would have seen his veins clearly throbbing at his temples. All this while, he had been aware that there was someone walking in the snow in the middle of the night. He had followed the faint sound of the footsteps along with his team. He knew nothing good ever happened this late in the night, but he had not been prepared for what he had found. He had dealt with many a misguided young infiltrator in the past, but this, a mere child? Who were these barbarians? Would they not spare even the innocent children? What kind of jihad was this? What religion taught to sacrifice children and youth? This was no jihad. It was simply a rape of humanity. What he saw was a pale, helpless face of innocence. He now recognized her. He had seen her often, hiding behind a tree when he and his team would be out patrolling. He would smile and beckon her, but she would always hide behind the tree. Sara's eyes were now half closed. Her lips were turning blue. Her hands kept slipping from her head and her body swayed gently from side to side. How does one deal with this? Should he pronounce this child guilty and shoot her? Or should he put his own life and that of his comrades on the line? It suddenly dawned upon him that the tiny form was going to collapse and fall to the ground at any moment. If she fell on her stomach, the crude bomb was sure to go off. It would blow her petite form completely, leaving nothing behind but a red mess in the white snow. He knew he was not going to reach her in time, but still he made an effort and increased his pace. He was closing in on her and was now in the zone where he himself could be blown to pieces along with her. He ordered the rest of his team to retreat. They followed his orders reluctantly. He did not want anyone else to get hurt. That must have been the aim of the terrorist behind this entire exercise to take down as many Indian soldiers as possible along with this little innocent child. He would not let that happen. He could not allow them to win. Time was running out. To his horror, he saw the little girl's knees buckling now and her torso bending forward towards the ground. The first thought that crossed Captain Rawat's mind was that of regret at not being able to save the child. He knew he was too late, and he was aware of the fact that he too was going to be blown up. But he kept going. He had to try till the end. The little form was coming down in slow motion as Captain Rawat raced towards her. Then a few meters short of her, he froze as he saw the explosive-laden belt hover barely a couple of inches above the snow on the ground. In that frozen moment of time, he and the little girl were suspended between life and death. Death was imminent, and he was helpless to stop the inevitable. He stopped breathing. Suddenly, from out of nowhere, two strong arms appeared from behind her and held her by her shoulders, straightening her body. Captain Rawat's lungs pulled in a deep, long breath and his body shuddered with relief. He saw Sepoy Dilawar Singh, one of his team members, standing behind her, holding her firmly. Sepoy Dilawar had disobeyed his captain's orders, and instead of retreating, he had swiftly encircled the target and approached her from behind. The captain had to tread slowly so as to not scare the little girl, but Sepoy Dilawar had been able to run full stream and reach her in the nick of time. For the first time, Captain Rawat was overjoyed at having been disobeyed. The little girl lay unconscious in Dilawar's arms. Captain Rawat was now by their side. The danger was not over yet. Carefully, he unbuckled the crude bomb from her delicate waist and with a wide swing of his arm, flung the contraption away in the air down the open slope. The bomb exploded the second it hit the snow at a safe distance from where the trio stood. The explosion was deafening. Sara woke up with a start and started to struggle out of the hold of the two strong arms that had saved her life.
This is Richa signing off. Take good care of yourselves till I'm back with the next story.